In the summer of 1979, something unbelievable happened inside a baseball stadium in Chicago that no one could have ever predicted. What started as a simple promotional idea quickly turned into one of the most chaotic and shocking nights in American sports history. Thousands of people gathered at Comiskey Park not just for a baseball game, but to watch something even more unusual: hundreds of disco records being destroyed in the middle of the field. But what was meant to be a fun, harmless event suddenly spiraled out of control in a way that shocked players, officials, and even the organizers themselves. Fires broke out, the crowd lost control, and the stadium turned into a scene of pure chaos. By the end of the night, a professional baseball game had to be forfeited. Police were called in, and the event became forever known as Disco Demolition Night, a moment that symbolized not just the end of an idea, but the explosive clash of music, culture, and emotion in America. After that shocking opening night, people started asking a simple question: how did something so strange even happen in the first place? The answer begins with the rise of disco music in America during the 1970s. At that time, disco was everywhere. It filled dance floors, radio stations, and TV shows. It was bright, energetic, and different from anything people had heard before. Movies like Saturday Night Fever made disco a global trend, and for a while, it felt like nothing could stop it. But as disco grew, not everyone was happy about it. Many rock music fans felt that their favorite style of music was being pushed aside. They believed rock was raw, real, and meaningful, while disco felt artificial and overly commercial to them. This growing frustration slowly created a cultural divide between two groups of music lovers. Even though both sides were simply expressing themselves through sound in Chicago, this frustration became louder than anywhere else because of one man, radio DJ Steve Dahl. He had been working in radio when his station suddenly switched from rock music to disco. For him, this was not just a job change. It felt personal. He lost his position and his platform, and that anger slowly turned into something much bigger. On his new radio show, he began openly mocking disco music. He destroyed disco records on air, made joke about them, and encouraged listeners to join in his dislike for the genre. What started as frustration soon turned into a movement. Thousands of listeners began to follow him, agreeing with his opinions and sharing the same anger toward disco. Without realizing it, Dahl had created a loyal group of fans who were ready to take their emotions beyond the radio and into the real world. At the same time, the Chicago White Sox baseball team was struggling. Attendance at games was low, and the stadium was not filling up the way it used to. The team needed something bold to bring people back. That is when an unusual idea was born. The team's management decided to team up with Steve Dahl and turn his anti-disco movement into a live event. The plan sounded simple and even funny at first. Fans would pay just 98 cents to enter the stadium and bring a disco record with them. During the event, those records would be destroyed in the middle of the field between two baseball games. On paper, it looked like a creative promotion that would attract attention and boost ticket sales. But there was one major problem. No one truly understood how intense the reaction would become that on July 12, 1979, Comiskey Park began to fill up with fans from all over Chicago. Some came for baseball, but many came for something else entirely. They came to take part in what they believed was a protest against disco music. The crowd grew bigger and bigger until it completely overwhelmed expectations. Instead of a few thousand people, tens of thousands arrived. The stadium quickly became overcrowded, and many fans who could not get inside started climbing fences and forcing their way through gates. Outside the stadium, traffic was blocked for hours, and the entire area became chaotic even before the main event began. Inside, the energy was loud, wild, and unpredictable. People were shouting, drinking, and throwing disco records even before anything officially started. It was clear that this was no longer just a baseball game. It had become something completely different today. As the night went on, things only got worse. During the baseball games, fans began throwing objects onto the field, including records, fireworks, and trash. Players were distracted and even afraid to continue playing. The atmosphere inside the stadium was no longer safe or controlled. Then, Steve Dahl arrived on the field in military-style clothing, driving a Jeep and leading the crowd in chants against disco music. At that moment, a huge box of disco records was brought out and exploded in the center of the field. The explosion sent fire and smoke into the air, and pieces of vinyl scattered across the stadium. This dramatic moment acted like a trigger. Thousands of fans rushed onto the field, tearing up grass, pulling out bases, and running in every direction. Some people even started destroying stadium property, while others simply joined the chaos because everyone else was doing it. Within minutes, the situation became completely uncontrollable. The baseball game could not continue, and officials had no choice but to declare the field unsafe. The second game of the doubleheader was eventually forfeited, something extremely rare in professional baseball history. Police were called in to regain control of the stadium, and several people were arrested. Although most injuries were minor, the damage was already done. Comiskey Park had turned from a sports venue into a scene of destruction. What was supposed to be a fun promotional idea had become a historic failure in crowd control and planning. After the event, opinions about Disco Demolition Night were deeply divided. Some people saw it as a harmless, even funny moment where fans expressed their dislike for disco music in an extreme but entertaining way. Others saw it as something much darker, pointing out that disco music was strongly connected to Black, Latino, and LGBTQ communities. To them, the event represented more than just music. It reflected deeper social tensions and exclusion. Over time, disco music itself began to decline in popularity, but it is difficult to say that this single event caused it. In reality, music trends were already changing, with new styles like punk, new wave, and electronic music starting to rise. Still, Disco Demolition Night became a symbol of the end of an era, even if that ending was already happening naturally today. The event is remembered as one of the most unusual moments in American sports and music history. It is studied as an example of how crowds can behave when emotions take over logic, and how quickly a simple idea can turn into something uncontrollable. It also serves as a reminder that entertainment, music, and culture are deeply connected to human identity and emotion. When those emotions are triggered in large groups, the results can be powerful and sometimes dangerous. Disco Demolition Night is not just a story about broken records or a baseball game gone wrong. It is a story about people, passion, and what happens when excitement turns into chaos in a matter of minutes. To iron the years after Disco Demolition Night, the event slowly transformed from a chaotic sport promotion into a powerful cultural memory. What once looked like a simple radio stunt became something far more meaningful in hindsight. Sports historians, journalists, and filmmakers continued to revisit that night, trying to understand not just what happened, but why it happened. Many agreed that it was not just about disco music or baseball. It was about timing, emotions, and a crowd that became too large and too energized to control. The event is now often used in studies about crowd psychology, showing how quickly group behavior can shift when excitement, anger, and entertainment mix together in one place. It also became a lesson for sports organizations about the importance of planning, security, and understanding audience reactions before launching large public events at the same time. The legacy of disco itself became more complex than many people realize. While Disco Demolition Night is sometimes described as a death of disco, the reality is very different. Disco did not disappear overnight. Instead, it slowly evolved and influenced many new music styles. Elements of disco, such as strong beats, electronic sounds, and dance rhythms, can still be found in modern pop, house, and electronic dance music. Artists and producers continue to build on disco's foundation, even after its popularity faded from the mainstream spotlight. So, while the public reaction in 1979 may have felt like an ending, it was actually more of a transformation. Music rarely dies completely. It changes shape and finds new life in different forms. Looking back, one of the most striking things about Disco Demolition Night is how unpredictable human behavior can be when emotions take control. What started as a 98-cent ticket promotion turned into a historic riot inside a baseball stadium. It showed how powerful influence can be, especially when it spreads through media and public opinion. A radio personality frustration turned into a movement turned into an event turned into chaos witnessed by thousands. It is a reminder that ideas shared with large audiences can grow far beyond their original intention. Once emotions are involved, even simple concept can become something much bigger and sometimes uncontrollable. Even today, people still talk about that night because it feels almost unreal. It sounds like something from a movie rather than real life. But it happened, and it left a permanent mark on both sports history and cultural history in America. The broken records, the rushing crowd, the smoke rising from the field, All of it became symbols of a moment when entertainment and emotion collided in the most unexpected way. For some, it is remembered as a funny or strange moment in baseball history. For others, it is a serious warning about crowd behavior and cultural tension. But for everyone who studies it, it remains a powerful example of how quickly order can turn into chaos. In the end, Disco Demolition Night is more than just a story about music or baseball. It is a story about people. It shows how strongly humans connect to culture, how quickly emotions spread in a crowd, and how fragile control can become in large public events. It also reminds us that history is not always shaped by major political decisions or world events. Sometimes, it is shaped by unexpected moments in stadiums, streets, and gatherings where ordinary people come together and something extraordinary happens. And that is why, decades later, Disco Demolition Night is still remembered. Not just as an event, but as a lesson that continues to feel relevant even today. Disco Demolition Night remains one of the most unforgettable and chaotic moments in entertainment history. What began as a simple promotional idea quickly turned into a massive cultural explosion that nobody was prepared for. To bring everything together, Disco Demolition Night is remembered today as far more than just a baseball promotion gone wrong. It represents a moment in history where entertainment, music, identity, and emotion all collided in one place and created something completely unexpected. What started as a simple idea, bringing fans together to destroy disco records, quickly turned into a symbol of how powerful public influence and group energy can become when not properly controlled. Looking back at the entire chain of events, it becomes clear that this night was not caused by a single mistake, but by a combination of cultural tension, media influence, and rising public emotions that were already building long before the stadium gates opened. When we reflect on the rise of disco and the strong reaction against it, we can understand why the situation became so intense. Disco was not just music. It represented a lifestyle, a fashion, and a cultural movement that made some people feel included, while others felt left out. At the same time, rock music fans felt their identity was being challenged. In this environment, even a small spark was enough to create a much larger reaction. That spark came in the form of radio influence and public frustration, which eventually turned into a stadium event that was meant to be entertaining but ended up becoming uncontrollable. The lesson here is not just about music trends, but about how deeply people attach emotions and identity to culture that as the chaos unfolded that night, it became a real-life example of how quickly order can break down in a large crowd. Thousands of people, each with their own intentions, suddenly became part of a single wave of movement that no one could fully direct. The destruction of records, the rush onto the field, and the complete shutdown of a professional baseball game all showed how fragile structure can be when excitement takes over. What was supposed to be controlled entertainment turned into something unpredictable and overwhelming. In many ways, it became a case study for how crowd psychology works in real time, where individual decisions are often replaced by group behavior. In the years that followed, people tried to define what Disco Demolition Night truly meant. Some called it a marketing disaster, others called it a cultural protest, and some even saw it as a turning point in American music history. But the truth is more layered than any single label. It was a mix of all these things at once. It exposed how media can shape public opinion, how quickly emotions can spread through large groups, and how events designed for entertainment can sometimes cross into chaos if the emotional temperature is too high. It also showed that once something becomes a public spectacle, its meaning is no longer controlled by its creators. It is shaped by the crowd itself. Even decades later, the event still attracts attention because it feels both unbelievable and real at the same time. It is one of those rare moments where sports history and cultural history overlap so strongly that they cannot be separated. The broken records are no longer just pieces of vinyl. They have become symbols of a larger story about change, resistance, and unpredictability. And while disco music eventually faded from mainstream popularity, its influence never